Mom, Dad, I just have to say, it breaks my heart watching you stress over dinner every night. This year, I don't want you doing the fridge stare down. Hot take, with the new Blue Apron, eating healthy is easy. They've got pre-made and one-pan meals with plenty of balanced nutrition. No subscription needed. You could be plating like a chef instead of negotiating with leftovers. Make it your healthy, tasty, and easy 2026 dinner resolution. Just saying.
Get 50% off your first 2 orders plus free shipping with code LISTEN50. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Flowers die in 3 days. Matching underwear from MeUndies? That's a gift that lasts. MeUndies creates matching prints for couples and friends. Same adorable designs in different cuts for each of you. All made from their signature ultra-modal fabric that feels impossibly soft. With 30 million pairs sold and 90,000 5-star reviews, MeUndies matching prints are the perfect gift. Valentine's Day is February 14th, so don't wait. Get exclusive deals up to 50% off at MeUndies.com/Acast. Code ACAST. That's MeUndies.com/Acast. Code ACAST.
Oh, no. This is a logbook entry from the 11th of June 1978. Had a call from a 19-year-old TV who had been thrown out of home this evening by his parents, who had just discovered he'd phoned Samaritans. We had a long chat, but he will probably phone back tomorrow for long-term advice. Luckily, he seemed reasonably together about his situation and was reconciled to spending a night in his Mini.
You're listening to The Logbooks, untold stories from Britain's LGBTQ+ history, in partnership with Faber Books.
I'm Tash Walker.
And I'm Adam Zmith.
Since we finished making the Logbooks podcast in 2022, we've been writing a book published by Faber. It's called The Logbooks, and Adam's turned 40.
You too!
I don't look at those.
The book goes deeper into Switchboard's archive and other archives, and includes more stories from the 70s, 80s, 90s and noughties. 4 decades.
Listening to queer people's essential stories is always central to our work.
So in this season of the podcast, we want to share some of the interviews we conducted as research for our book.
Now you too can listen to all the amazing, powerfully queer storytellers we've listened to, in their own words, with their own voices. This week, we've got a new voice that we're going to be listening to, someone that you interviewed, Adam.
Yes.
And that is?
That is Anson Mackay. And I was contacted, I think, by Anson originally because they were a fan of the Logbooks podcast, and so they were kind of following us on social media and everything when we were doing that. And they and I have had like a bit of communication back and forth. Also, we've bumped into each other in the street a couple of times. One day they were going to the theatre and I bumped into them.
Adam coming to a street near you.
Yes, exactly. I'm just like marauding around the streets looking for people to interview for the Logbooks. And anyway, Anson's great. And as I was in touch with them and we were talking, I was like, Anson, I actually really want to interview you for the book, because we had finished doing the podcast already, but we were researching the book and I knew that Anson had some really important stories. So that was why I wanted to interview them. Yeah,
and they are really important stories, but they're also quite difficult to hear, and there's a lot that Anson has experienced that is hard.
Yeah, that's right. And we should tell listeners that there is some stories of homophobic bullying and abuse and mention of suicide as well. And one of the things that we wanted to include Anson for is because of this story of rural life. I mean, they are from like a really teeny tiny town on the very north coast of Scotland, and they got sent away to school because there was not a school nearby. You know, it's that kind of place. But of course, that's also where they encountered bullies, which you're going to hear about in the interview. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting from this interview is about how university can change people. It's happening in an era in their life when they're going through a lot of changes anyway, because they're 18, 19, 20. And then also Anson just personally had a lot of changes that they went through at university. And I think that that's something that it's common, a lot of people experience, but the way that Anson talks about it is really important and really interesting.
Yeah, and I also really love how, and can relate to what Anson talks about, their gender identity and language and things not necessarily being available to you or open to you until much later because of the evolution of language.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and in this interview, Anson sometimes says Clause 28, which is synonymous with Section 28 of the Local Government Act 1988, the piece of legislation that we talk about a lot. If we just start, first of all, with your... Take me back to the start then, to your childhood, because you started talking about that. So tell me about the town that you grew up in and what that was like for you.
Okay, so I grew up in the Highlands of Scotland, right on the very north coast. It's a small village called Tongue, maybe about 100 people or something. And I lived on the outskirts of Tongue in Brayton. And I grew up on a croft. So a croft is like a small kind of farm holding. So you had some sheep and chickens and stuff. So obviously it was a very kind of remote area. And then so to go to school, I had to go about sort of 12 miles away. And then if I wanted to go to school to do my O grades and higher, then I had to board away to a basic boarding school. That's a comprehensive boarding school. It wasn't a public one. So all the kids from around the north coast would go to this one sort of feeder school. And so, as you might imagine, sort of growing up. So I was born in 1967. So by the time I was kind of like sort of, I think sort of wondering about my sort of sexual identity and stuff. I would have been about 13. So this would have been about sort of 1980, I guess, I think, sort of late 1970s, early 1980s. As you might imagine, in the Highlands of Scotland on the north coast, there aren't very many gay role models. And in fact, being gay in Scotland was pretty much frowned upon, and it was still illegal, even after sort of decriminalisation in England. So really, all you had, sort of my gay experiences really were in really kind of watching Top of the Pops and seeing, people like, Boy George and Marlon and these very much sort of gender non-conforming artists who today still seem revolutionary. But imagine back then what that was like. And you'd have your father saying, "Oh, look at those poofters on the TV," type thing. And so you knew that this was not normal, but still it gave you a kind of sort of frisson of excitement that there is like an alternative universe outside the Highlands.
Did it feel like that, literally like an alternative universe? Because that is such... I've seen Top of the Pops too from that time period, and it is just like the people, the presentation, the style. It was, Top of the Pops in the 80s was just... I mean, it's so crazy.
It really was, and it wasn't just sort of people like sort of Boy George and stuff. Like Annie Lennox was very gender non-conforming, and so it was like sort of men and women, and it really was, I think, your only glimpse into... to me, it was like an alternate reality. I remember seeing on the news there was it must have been the late 1970s, and there was a gay pride protest in Aberdeen. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, like, subconsciously back in my head going, how can they even be there? How do these people exist? I don't understand how they can even be filmed. And it just, you kind of block these things out. You kind of know that you're different all the time. And so when I went to school, I kind of knew that I was different. And I was so when I board away in the school, I shared this, like, we were in a sort of student house, shared a room with these 3 other guys. And basically for the first year I was there, I was pretty heavily bullied for being different.
What did they say?
It was just it was lots of like sort of, you're a poof, or I can't remember the words. That was the obvious word. I can't remember whether they use things like Nancy Boy and stuff. But it wasn't just for being what they thought that I was a gay. But I guess also maybe influenced by what I saw on TV and stuff and Pops. I was at that time quite gender non-conforming. I would wear makeup to school, and this is like in Highlands in 1982 type thing. So I would make my own T-shirts out of pillowcases and dye them and all this kind of stuff, and I just make my own wardrobe and things. And so there was that being suspected of being gay. It was like looking very queer, and also weirdly being being quite clever. And so these things always make you stand out from everyone else. And so I found that it's quite challenging, because the form of bullying was in the dorm room I'd be electrocuted, and then in school nothing was said, and they were very pally to me. And so you had this kind of real kind of double thing whereby I couldn't tell anyone, but yeah, I knew this was happening to me, and that made me kind of like pretty fucked up, I think.
How did they electrocute you?
They made, like, in their technical class, they made a gadget where they just like could pass electric current.
Okay.
And then they just electrocute me like that.
And it was the issue that, well, lots of issues. God, I'm sorry to hear that. Was the thing that there's a sort of gaslighting going on because they're like not mean to you in front of the teachers, basically. That's what it is. But in the dorm room they are, because they're not supervised.
Yeah. And it was like, and if you tell, then you'll get worse. And there's also things like, they would like sort of fill my bed with aftershave and stuff like that. And so you just thinking of this stuff. And I still actually have a really bad reaction to when it's small things like sort of brute and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of it was just a fear. For me, it was a fear of going back to the dormitory. It was a fear of going to bed through lights out, because I knew this stuff would happen. And eventually I asked for a room change after that first year. And I got a room change into different level type stuff. And then it became much better. Although at school there was still a lot of like catcalling, so I was still looking different.
Yeah.
So that was kind of, so school wasn't really the best time, I think.
Did you change your gender expression because of the bullying? So
I did. Toned it right down, but not until my 6th year. But it's when I went to university, that was when I think I really kind of so I think I was very insecure about making friends, because it hadn't really worked when I was like living home and stuff, and so I really kind of constructed this persona around me that I would be this kind of like very sort of normal. People wouldn't recognize me; they wouldn't see me. I would just kind of just fit into anywhere type thing. And I remember then, like for my first kind of couple of years of university, just really kind of forced myself into. I wasn't out. I was still effectively. Well, so I did form the Celibate Society with a couple of friends, because I wasn't going to have sex with any woman, and that seemed like a good way of having this unofficial Celibate Society.
What university was it?
Edinburgh University.
Okay, so you were in Edinburgh.
Yeah. And I went there in 1984. And so the university was sort of quite difficult. I should sort of preface, like, when I grew up in the Highlands, both my parents were alcoholics, and I never drank at all when I was at school and all that kind of stuff. And when I came to university, I'd find that then I did start drinking. And when I look, I didn't really notice at the time. When I look back at it, then it's really very obvious that these behavioural patterns were just sort of coming out then type thing.
What do you mean by that exactly? That the starting the drinking when you were at university, what is that behaviour exactly? What did it mean?
It was often drinking to excess, drinking before I'd go out, and again. My sisters were doing that as well when I was there. They're older, I had 3 older sisters, and they were doing that at home, and they were just repeating behaviour to what our parents were doing. And I thought I'd bypass that, and I was a clever one, and I got out. And my father kept saying, "You should get out of here." And And then sort of looking back and realized I was actually falling into those kind of sort of same patterns. And then just kind of, sort of was really messing up university.
The studies.
Like, I was often not going to classes, and I was failing exams every year. And then after the end of my second year, I'd seen someone at the university who was friends of one of my flatmates. And I saw this guy who had this like red nylon jumper on, took it off. Like there was like lots of static, it was really cheap, like polyester in the student union type thing. And I thought, oh my God, and I just completely fell obsessed with this person. And that was kind of the sexuality awakening kind of, I remember writing down saying, oh God, this is happening again. And I thought I blocked it all out. And, I was this kind of very straight conforming person. And as it turned out, that was my partner, David, who he hadn't come out either. And we kind of ended up being good friends. And then, for whatever reason, we ended up like sort of, just getting it together eventually.
So what year was that?
This would have been in the end of 1986. It started in 1987.
So that means you've been together for
7 years. Yeah, wow. So quite a long time. And in that time, I was still drinking a lot. And it's just like student trauma. My flatmate, Sharon, she was obsessed by me. She tried to commit suicide when she found out that I was suddenly sort of seeing David, even though she's my flatmate and my landlady. Then her best friend, Paul, was obsessed with David. It was just this kind of everyone. We had a bunch of friends who were all kind of straight. We all hung out together, a lot of women. And within about 6 months, we all sort of tumbled out of the closet. And it was just weird. And there's some well-known people in that, sort of Joanna Cherry, for example, is now like a Scottish Member of Parliament. She's part of this cohort as well. And then I was re-dropping out of university and having a really hard time, and then failed all my exams. And I hadn't realized how serious it was, but then I got called into the dean and sort of saying, you're going to be kicked out. Is there anything you can do to mitigate your circumstances? And I just told her everything about, sort of really the sort of meeting David, the drinking, some of the abuse, friends trying to commit suicide over this as well. And she got me like a taxi immediately just to the counsellor there and then. And so we came to a deal that allowed me to repeat a year, change course, do botany, pay my own fees, which is unheard of back in the 1980s. And if I did well, then I'd get back into my honours year. And that's kind of what happened. So I think that was the first part of the gayness really, and really it was kind of like coming from a very remote area, coming from an alcoholic background, but then put into a situation like a city, which is just so oh my God, where all these choices, what you do, and all that kind of stuff. That was a bit when I look back, it was a bit of a fucked up couple of years. So fun. But yeah, it took me a long while to realize that, it wasn't normal.
It's a lot to process in a really short amount of time as well, isn't it? And especially when you're so young, and you think at the time at that age, you don't think you're young.
No. and I was 17. So, and I could have gone to university when I was 16, because in Scotland you can do that. I always thought that was just weird that you could have, Scotland, go to university at 16, you could be a qualified doctor when you're 21 years old after 5 years, medical degree. You would not trust someone who's just 21 coming from a Scottish background with your life type thing.
Yeah.
But that's, that's just the culture of it was.
That was the system.
Flowers die in 3 days. Matching underwear from MeUndies, that's a gift that lasts. MeUndies creates matching prints for couples and friends. Same adorable designs in different cuts for each of you. All made from their signature ultramodal fabric that feels impossibly soft. With 30 million pairs sold and 90,000 five-star reviews, MeUndies matching prints are the perfect gift. Valentine's Day is February 14th, so don't wait. Get exclusive deals up to 50% off at MeUndies.com/ACAST. Code ACAST. That's MeUndies.com/ACAST. Code ACAST.
Mom, I saw Dylan's dad make dinner. Like, actually cook, and it was straight fire. He said it was Blue Apron Assemble and Bake. All the ingredients showed up pre-chopped, and he just laid it out on a baking sheet, and no cap. Dinner was on the table in like 25 minutes. Apparently, it's chef designed, and it has like over 40 grams of protein. That's a lot, right? So maybe we try it. Just saying. You can be the next Dylan's dad. Blue Apron. Get 50% off your first 2 orders plus free shipping with code LISTEN50. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Oh, it's such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Visit Blinds.com now for up to 50% off with minimum purchase plus a free professional measure. Rules and restrictions apply.
Hello, our company is called Aunt Nell.
Cute name. Needs a Patreon.
Whether we're making podcasts like this one, or organising events, or facilitating queer community workshops, or training the next generation of storytellers,
Aunt Nell invites people to listen differently.
For tons of bonus content, including exclusive episodes of the logbooks, and to support all our work,
you can join our Patreon now. Go to patreon.com/AuntNell.
Membership tiers start from just a few quid a month.
So those early years, when things started to get a bit maybe back on track or on a track,
Yeah.
You and David starting to be together, you're being more gay, I'm guessing,
Yeah.
and you're with a partner as well.
Yeah.
What are your memories then of, that's almost like a kind of like a second adolescence? I don't want to put words in your mouth, by the way, but I'm just thinking that's a new period where we're being out, being queer, out and queer in a particular way is happening for you. What are your memories of that then, once things were on that track?
Yeah, I would have to say it was really my first adolescence.
Okay.
I think that that's when I felt that I was actually being me. I wasn't this kind of like, I don't really have that much memories from growing up at home or at school, because something really bad, you just kind of like sort of, you force yourself to forget them. But I do remember, the time of being with David in the first couple of years as being, it's really weird. I think because we were both coming from quite like dysfunctional, chaotic backgrounds. His is very violent, mine was very alcoholic, his quite alcoholic as well. And, so we had these kind of like, rules in our relationship that we would have an open relationship right from the very start. So go and sleep with the people when we could, because we were just discovering ourselves. And how could you not? There's too many choices there type thing. But the only caveat was we'd always tell each other as soon as it happened. And so that was often very difficult, because then you'd have to tell the person that you believed that you loved, and did love, something that's very hard to do, because, are you losing trust, and will this break the relationship? And, it became difficult sometimes, but in those early days, not so much. But also this is the time of HIV and AIDS as well. And then subsequently Clause 28. And in the mid-1980s, they're just horrendous. If you're, LGBTQ growing up, if you're gay growing up, you just had, we see how bad the press is today with dealing with sort of trans and non-binary, especially sort of trans people. I would say back in the 80s, it was probably worse, because it's a lot of the same tropes are being used about, they'll impact your children, they're a threat, they're a menace to society, etc. But there, the language was full out, like, you had, chief commissioner sort of saying, all puss who have HIV should be put into an offshore prison or whatever. The language was really, really foul. It was very much like, it was just awful. And that was all the press, including left-leaning press. It wasn't just a right-wing press. And then you had AIDS as well, and HIV, and the scare of that was just horrendous.
Right. So I want to ask a bit more about that then, and just putting aside the press for a moment and the public conversation about that. What was your experience among the people that you knew of in that period, the mid to late 80s then? Are you in Edinburgh that whole time?
Yes, I was there until 1989, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so that period before you left Edinburgh, what was your experience among, with your partner and partners of and friends of HIV/AIDS? Because Edinburgh's not often a scene in the way that this story is told. In fact, Scotland's not often a scene in the telling of this story. So what was your experience on the ground?
So I think Edinburgh was different from many other places because as well as, mainly gay men or men of sex and men catching HIV and developing AIDS, also people who are drug addicts as well. And Edinburgh had a very large heroin scene, injecting scene. You kind of sort of see that from Train Spotting and stuff. And so there's like two sections of people with HIV. There's your drug addicts, and also your people who are gay as well. And so the demonization of both. But in one sense, that meant that HIV is actually present in sort of it's just more widespread, the knowledge of what HIV can do. It doesn't mean that people thought better about it, but it wasn't just restricted to like the poofs or the queers, whatever. And so, I think that did put a different take on how HIV was treated in Edinburgh.
And your experience?
So had quite a few friends who died from HIV. And also sort of died from AIDS after sort of developing and catching HIV. And it was a bit of a collective trauma, but it was kind of one that you just went through it and you accepted it and you cried, and then you had to move on because then other people were ill as well, and you couldn't really hang around. Sort of sounds awful, like mourning one person, because that they just became part of you, I think. There's one guy, Mark, who David and I were particularly had a very deep friendship with. Almost, I would say, we would have been like, three of us would have been lovers, I think, if he hadn't had HIV. And we still developed the friendship, but without the sex part. And I think when he died, that was particularly devastating for him, obviously, and his friends. So again, that was difficult.
Yeah. Did you talk, you and David, about closing the relationship or changing that aspect of the relationship given the circumstances?
No, but I think this is what surprises many people. We kind of we didn't have an agreement, but we never. So David and I never fucked. Okay, we never fucked each other. And ill intercourse was just not part of our repertoire, and both of us were very happy with that. And I think, obviously that was partly to do with HIV. That was the main way that you could catch it. And so I think we just had decided, that we just wouldn't do that.
You were having sex together in other ways, but
yes,
without anal penetration.
Yes. So you become. I've never understood, and I still don't understand why gay men think that fucking is all there is to do about sex. And you can become very creative. The clothing you wear, what you do, where you go, the scenarios you play out, all this kind of stuff. Sex and open air opening. There's just so many things that you can do that just don't involve fucking. That's not the be all and end all. And I've always thought that. And but that was, and it wasn't until much later we kind of connected that probably was because of HIV. That was the route that you would, fastest way to catch it. So we just never do.
Oh, I see. So it wasn't that was just a sort of like a rising part of your different sexual appetites and the sexual dynamic between the two of you? You think it was because of the circumstances
I think
of HIV, and you sort of unconsciously just said internally to yourselves, we won't be doing that.
Yeah.
And the same with other people.
Yes.
Okay.
And but having said that, there was, so that's, but if it had been something that we wanted to do, we would have tried it. Because you get in a situation whereby you're having sex, you're going to want to do something, you have to have a pretty big break for you not to do that. But we honestly, I think we tried it once, that I don't like this. And he was like going, oh, I'm not doing it. So we just mutually were not fussed about anal fucking.
Yeah. And the zooming to the Clause 28 stuff, which was obviously a national conversation at the time. You mentioned the press hostility earlier, and that was a main kind of battleground for it.
Yeah.
I know that there's lots of activism at the time, especially in the big cities in England that I know of.
Yeah.
Again, similar question, like on the ground where you were in Scotland, in Edinburgh specifically, apart from what you saw in the press, what was that conversation like among people?
So I think it was quite similar. There was in many ways, Section 28, if it had any good thing, Clause 28 at the time was that it brought people together as to fight back. And it's very hard to fight back against HIV because what are you fighting against? You got, public morality, all that kind of stuff. But with sort of Clause 28 at the time, before it came Section 28, was like, you had a very real thing, that you are stopping people from being just who they are, and you're stopping kids from trying to be who they are, and you're going to cause them more damage. And that was a big, people just coalesced around that. So
was there movement in Edinburgh specifically?
Yeah. So we had, there's great, the Scottish Homosexual Action Group, SHAG. And that was one of the big, sort of networks that people campaigned. There was an LGBT cafe called the Blue Moon Cafe. It was Siobhan, Catriona and Alan who set it up. And that became a real kind of like focus point for people meeting, deciding what campaigns they would do, doing fundraising through network discos and all that kind of stuff. And Katrina became one of my closest friends type thing. And so, there was a lot of activism around Clause 28, came Section 28, and with that also brought in activism, to campaign for better resources for HIV and AIDS and all that kind of thing.
And would you say that you were kind of a part of this scene, this movement, which involved some of the nightlife things that you've already mentioned and some of the political activism as well?
Yeah. So in Edinburgh, I don't think I was, I wasn't a major player in that. I was kind of, I think, trying to get my own studies done and, just enjoy being out and all that kind of thing. But when I moved to Manchester in 1989 to do my PhD, and there I joined ACT UP in Manchester. And that was a much more activist group for fighting against HIV and also Section 28 as well. And there, I'd be part of a more active network in having, it's like sort of die-ins on the roads and stopping traffic and, doing sort of minor disruptive things like that and organising fundraisers and things. So my kind of personal activism didn't really get going until Manchester in 89, whereas in Edinburgh, I think I was just happy to let the older people do it and I would just take part in it, I think.
When did you feel like, well, not when, but did you feel like you were belonging in any of these particular groups that you've mentioned, whether it's the Friends in Edinburgh, the ACT UP group in Manchester, the partnership with David in his early days?
Yeah. So I think I always kind of felt, so I don't know that I felt that I belonged in Edinburgh, because when I moved to Manchester, it was bigger, it had a bigger gay scene. Within like my first term there, I got a job as a barman in this like super trendy queer nightclub, just as kind of like sort of the drug scene was taking off and stuff. And it was really only then in Manchester I felt, I am gay. I am this like, gay man and all of that beholds type thing. And at the same time, when I was kind of I think I was really finding my sexuality and sort of confidence in Manchester. David was doing a lot of, because he was doing a PhD as well, but he was in Edinburgh, but he was spending a lot of time in San Francisco. So he's going over there and he was like developing his own kind of like sort of personality over there type thing. And so that 3 years when we were kind of like in separate cities, doing our PhDs, was I think partly personal growth for us because we were in different places, but we were experiencing kind of different things as well. So that's when I kind of first realized that, this is the gay scene, this is a scene, and this is something that I kind of feel very much part of and very much I belong to, and that I can actually campaign.
100% part of? Tell me a bit more about that feeling of belonging. How complete was it? In what ways was it complete? In what ways, if any, was it lacking?
I think I felt complete because, okay, this sounds very shallow, but, I had a job in this really cool nightclub. So I meet loads of people because you're a barman there. Everyone comes to talk to you and all that kind of stuff. I guess I developed a sense of confidence about being a gay man that I was attractive and I was handsome. Whereas I think in Edinburgh, there was very much, you felt a lot of sort of self-loathing. That you never, but I just Manchester was just different. It just felt like, this is where I've kind of like sort of finally sort of blossomed or something like that.
You're smiling so much when you remember that.
Yeah, because it's just, it was a pretty fab time. And I just remember like, coming home from working in a nightclub. And I remember following these two guys. This is in central Manchester. And then they'd broken into this factory, so I followed them into this factory. And it turned out there's this whole cottaging thing of this derelict factory where all these people were going. So I told all my friends, and then they started going there. And it's, you'd be wandering around in the pitch black, and it had like, big holes in the floor where you could fall right through. But it became this thing. It became this thing for about 6 months before the police found it and closed it down. And it was just kind of wild. It was just kind of like, this is really cool. And I think also because the clubbing scene, I really got into then.
Did you go to the Hacienda and take ecstasy?
Yes. Hacienda was never that fussed about, but they had monthly nights called Flesh, which were LGBTQ. The club I was in, the number one club, was actually the place to go if you're gay, lesbian, or queer, or whatever. And it was very druggy. And because I was working there, I just felt part of it. And I got into places free all the time. In fact, we had these cards in the number one club, like, red and black. And red as if you're a member, black as if you're staff member. That meant you could get into other clubs for free as well. So there's a nice network. So it was really cool. I could go to any bar. I got money off drinks, got in the free entry, skip queue. But then there's a white card. And this guy I was serving this guy, he's quite old and stuff. And he's saying, do you want to come back to mine? And I was kind of going, not really, but, it's nice to start chatting to you. And he's going, no, you have to, I've got this white card. And it turned out that, and I knew that David, the owner, also ran a brothel and a sauna in, I said Bolton or something like that, or on Altington maybe. And this white card, he'd guaranteed that they could have their pick of the boys type stuff. And there weren't many people who were doing a PhD working in the bar scene here type thing. And it's like, this is not happening. So it's like, anyways, but it's it was so distant from my academic PhD world. And it was like a queer scene that I just absolutely loved. So yeah, I think I'm smiling because it was pretty cool. It was pretty good.
I mean, I just love hearing people talking about their period on a scene like that, you know, and it happens for different people at different times in their life and in different ways, in different places. And I mean, going to that scene at that time and taking a pill is one of my like top 3 time travel moments, probably, if I had to pick. You know, Berlin pre-Nazis is another one, obviously.
Yeah.
But just remembering way back when you were putting down some of your gender expression, like at school and stuff, and going to Edinburgh and kind of like going it straight, as it were, or straight/celibate in terms of like trying to like knuckle down and all that. What about in that, sounds like in that gay queer world in Manchester, you felt really comfortable and you felt like you belonged. How about your gender identity in that moment?
It didn't manifest at all. It was still, you know, I was dressing. So in Manchester, dressing pretty much like, you know, sort of Happy Mondays type thing. You know, you dress down. You know, you're wearing dressing up type stuff. When I moved to London in '92, you know, I kind of adopted, if anything, the opposite. I would like shave my head and, you know, look like a clone, basically. So you go into a bar, you'd be able to pick me out from anyone else. I just looked like everyone else. I think I was still doing that. I was still trying to fit in terms of like, you know, what I wanted. I mean, you know, it's partly music, it was partly drugs, it was partly, you know, the types of bars I was going to and all that kind of stuff. But there was still no inkling at all about what the, you know, how I was much more gender non-conforming at home. That hadn't come out yet at all. I mean, and to be honest, I don't think it has come out yet, even, I don't think. And, you know, after sort of 30, 40 years of hiding it and preaching it away, you know, that kind of expression, you know, visibly outside might never come back, but, you know, inside it's definitely changed, I think.
Yeah, so interesting.
Have you ever been to the Hacienda?
I've not been to the Hacienda because I was like 5 years old in whatever, 1987
I know you're older
or
than me,
whatever.
I always forget, it's just like a year.
Okay, calm down. No, I loved listening to Anson talk about the Hacienda in the late 80s, not just because that's obviously like an iconic club, and that whole movement, that whole thing of like taking ecstasy and getting your tits and dancing and that whole thing, and also that having like a queer sensibility to it, as Anson alludes to as well. So I think that was great, and we knew that we wanted to write about nightlife in the book, so we ended up writing a whole chapter about it because there's loads of Switchboard logbooks about it, but also we've got loads of stories from people like Anson. What else did you think about Anson?
I really related to a lot of what Anson said. Like I said at the beginning, but it's the importance of being able to express yourself with the words that feel right for you.
Yeah.
And that takes time. It takes time not only because you need to work out what feels right for you, but also in Anson's case, and certainly my own, it's about language evolving alongside you too. It's really lovely to hear that. And it makes me think how great it is that we were able to interview and include people who were outside of Switchboard.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't call Switchboard, they weren't a volunteer there. They just have memories of being LGBTQ plus throughout these years that we're looking at.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that we got to chat to Anson.
Yeah, great.
So, any luck with helping us find Helen from the cover?
Oh, yeah.
The person on the right-hand side?
Yeah, if you've seen Helen, who's on the right-hand side of the cover image of the logbooks, and you think you might be able to help us track Helen down, then do let us know.
We want to know.
And you can also find other info about what we're doing and about the book on auntnell.com, or of course on our socials or on Aunt Nell's social as well.
And don't forget, we've got a Patreon, exclusive logbooks content,
Yes.
bonus episodes.
Exactly, at patreon.com/auntnell. The Logbooks is an Aunt Nell production in partnership with Faber Books.
It is hosted and produced by Tash and Adam Zmith.
The voice of the logbooks is Serena James.
The assistant producer is Marnie Woodmeade.
Engineered by David Pye.
Music by Tom Foskett-Barnes.
Original artwork by Natalie Doto.
Thanks to Steph Dickers and team at the Bishopsgate Institute.
Our publisher, Faber Books.
The Dreamboats at Acast.
The staff and volunteers at Switchboard, and all the contributors who shared their stories.
Switchboard continues to take phone calls from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. If you're affected by any of the issues in this podcast or need to discuss anything to do with your gender identity or sexuality, you can call Switchboard on 0800 0119 100. Email hello@switchboard.lgbt or instant message via switchboard.lgbt, where you can also donate money or time to help.
Flowers die in 3 days. Matching underwear from MeUndies, that's a gift that lasts. MeUndies creates matching prints for couples and friends. Same adorable designs in different cuts for each of you, all made from their signature ultramodal fabric that feels impossibly soft. With 30 million pairs sold and 90,000 5-star reviews, MeUndies matching prints are the perfect gift. Valentine's Day is February 14th, so don't wait. Get exclusive deals up to 50% off at MeUndies.com/Acast. Code ACAST. That's MeUndies.com/Acast. Code ACAST.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip. When it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.